Yesterday afternoon, after spending 2 weeks in New Zealand organizing things and things get ready to run this process without much difficulty and waiting for the supermarket online produce to arrive, I felt like I was kind of lost what to do. I was asking myself, so what's the point of me here and what is to happen? So I couldn't answer that question. So I stayed there, but feeling a little vulnerable that I usually have some spirit of doing certain things. But because of the weather, the rain, and the wind, and just closed in, I thought, well, this doesn't look so good. So that gave me a little bit low energy state. And after feeling like that, and when I was feeling like that, the way I usually deal with is don't do anything. Just accept everything and just stay there. So overnight, listening to some videos that I like a Myokoni, the Shin BUddhism, and reading some books, which I'm going to talk about from Dharma or Bodhidharma, like a Zen-related document, I could figure out why I was a little depressed or unorganized state of my mind. And since I could recover from that, so I reflected more what happened and why, and I think I came up with a good reason. Actually, when I am at a disarray or not quite clear with the energy level, don't do anything is the right idea because you don't know what's going on. So you are to be in samadhi, which I did. So I was following all the steps, but I could come up why I went into that state of mind which is uncomfortable and low energy. And the answer to that, I answer to myself after going through this, is that I was looking for something. I thought I had something to do and the mission and everything should be working in that direction, and I felt I lost it. So I thought, well, what was that I did something wrong? So I questioned, and I couldn't find the answer, but I found the answer after samadhi. And why I was in that state was the next question. And the reason for that is that I was looking for something, the mission, approaches, confidence, high energy level, but that's my mind talking. And of course, you should be watching out what your mind does. So that's the answer of me doing samadhi, quiet, but took time. And that's just okay. But the reflecting that confirmed the principal way. And I want to read this stuff. This is from one of the my favorite book of Zen from Daisetsu, and he's talking about the philosophy of Zen, which is a little bit odd title because Zen is not quite philosophy but more of action. But in there he was talking about Bodhidharma, who is known to be the patriarch, came from India, from Buddha's lineage, and he left the document. And he was referring to, and yesterday I was reading this and trying to make sense out of it, which I did finally. So this is what I found. So this is the official title for this 2 entry point and 4 action or some such thing. May not be the right translation, but that's the document. And in there, Bodhidharma was talking, there's the way of entry into Zen or enlightened state. And one is to use your brain. That's not the right way. Use the reasoning. So it sounds like a brain, but what it points to is that there's a true nature of who we are that is covered by delusion from outside, let's say. It's like a dust floating. And therefore, what's real inside, like a diamond or some ball that is perfect, cannot come out. Like the example of the waves and the transparent. See if the waves settle and you see what's bottom. And if you let go of the delusion and just be samadhi, then you find the space where there's no you or others. And if you stay there, and also not to be bothered by thinking and the words and logic, so that's the state of samadhi, then you find the state of samadhi, wu-wei, and that is called the entry through reasoning, the principal way. I don't know my translation is good or not, but basically supporting of the meditation, no mind, no self, and let everything to resolve, which I did. Not in sitting, but just laying down on the bed and pointing, what's this energy level about? And I didn't push anything, just observed, and stayed there, and reading this book and other YouTube video, and just starting to build up, what happened and why. So that's one point that this book point, which I read yesterday, and then that's clear. So that's one way. And there another way, which is not from the brain or the logic or the principle, but from the action of what may have taken place. And the Bodhidharma is talking about 4 different ways, which I thought was kind of funny. If there's a principle, why bother to look into those events that need to be explained? So the principle should be enough, was my thinking. So I didn't pay much attention, except I understood it. And I would repeat those 4 areas, which is not difficult to understand. So one of the first one is ho-ongyo in Japanese, which is if when they have a suffering event happening, and in my state of ambiguity and low energy, was not quite the suffering, but the pre-suffering, I thought, but was funny. But it applies that. So when there is the suffering or semi-suffering level, which is low energy, in my way of thinking at the time, then you should think that in the past there are things that happen that has developed as a habit. And the me as self compared to others, and had the sense of emotional mismatch, or even the feeling of other people to be the cause of your trouble, some such thing. But if you feel like it, well, in my case yesterday, I didn't feel like it. There was nothing for others to say, because in that sense, no self was there. That's why I was observing. But if you are in the sense of upset feeling, and that is related to someone's doing something to you. Yesterday, nobody's doing anything. I was doing just by myself. But if that's the case of someone else, there's no point of pushing that person away, or the feeling away, or feeling upset about it. So don't be regretful or upset about it, was the way of not punishing yourself by complaining others or some such thing. Or think bad of other person instead of you looking yourself to be responsible. So that's one way, which didn't quite apply in my case, but that's one of the 4. And the second one is basically saying like a zui engyo. En is cause and effect, and the zui is going with. So it means go with the flow, and whatever happens, happens. So in principle, we are to have no self, and therefore it is beyond the cause and effect, and you just accept everything as it is. If you don't have yourself, then it just flows. So that is the basic approach. So that's what I was doing, kind of similar to the first point I was talking about, that using the logic and the principle. This is also related to accepting whatever is happening, and there's nothing to be against. It just happens. And accept it. And therefore, everything passes, impermanence, and things would resolve, which it did, in my case, yesterday and this morning. So that's the second one out of 4. And the third one is the one, musho kyugyo. This in Japanese in meaning not seeking for something. Typical case as human is to be caught up in something because of the craving or aversion, and that is basically seeking for something. But since the wise person is with the reality of it is, truthfulness, then it's different. He is different because he has the peace mind in himself. There's no reason to be rushing or upset, but be able to go with the flow, whatever the shape that comes, just accept it. And everything in itself has this emptiness as its foundation. It's just a changing phenomena of whatever. So don't caught up in that about certain event and stuff like that. So it's like if there's good, there's bad coming because of those duality. Living in this samsara, is that the word? That the whole world is like living in a house which is burning. So if you think you have body, then everything becomes a cause of suffering. And you cannot be peaceful. And when you realize that, then you wouldn't caught up in some of those thoughts, and then you don't seek for things. And you don't exist. That's no mind and no self. And that's also the principle that was discussed at the beginning. The first point of the reasons about the truth. And if you understand no seeking as the basic, then that's the way to do it. That's the third one. And I did yesterday, although my energy level was low, just like an example of the cat sitting and waiting for the wound to heal. I was just staying put, not seeking for getting better. Maybe a little bit. And because of that, there was disturbance. But thinking about it as the disturbance instead of accepting it became an issue. So it prolonged the recovery. So if I had totally accepted in the moment and living in the now without any hang-up and no self and no mind, like in this case, not seeking and going everything as it is, accept, and not be resentful of someone or anything like that, then you should be as you are. No self, no mind, and your energy level should respond to that. Typically, waku-waku, the liveliness, is the life being displayed as the positive way of living instead of delusion and suffering as pushing you to have a low energy state. So anyway, that's also relating to what I felt I did. And the last one is shohogyo, which is to know the laws of universe and remind yourself. It's basically what it is. And what it says is that in its nature, Dharma or the laws of nature is by itself absolute and clear, calm and clear, or as it is, no hang-up, all that. And by realizing this point, then all the phenomena, what is appearing, is emptiness. And that's so powerful. It's kind of redundant, it may look like, but with others, like the first principle I mentioned, this emptiness is no mind, no thinking, and no self, and no everything is passing. Then without our putting our values, like why I feel low energy, that is your judgment, my judgment at the time, and you will be away from it. Because if you accept everything as empty, including your thought, then you are with no ego, no self, and no mind, just as you are, as it is, and be. So if you really understand this point, then you can resolve the issue. So that's basically is like a 2-3 pages in this book early on. And Daisetsu was talking a bunch of other stuff. This is about maybe 300, 200 page book. But this kind of summarizes Bodhidharma's basic teaching, which is also living in other people's teaching, whatever they left, and highlighted the key essence, the essence of principal way, how to deal with suffering and come out of it. So maybe I'm quite random to talk about this feeling or sense of what I read and digested. But yesterday afternoon, I read this and I just didn't make a judgment, just to stay with it. And I think that's the right attitude. Sometimes it just clicks and you maybe awaken. Sometimes this awakening process, if you call it, takes time because of the fuzziness related to the points that was shared, not accepting as it is, thinking too much and instead of accepting. And there could be a reason of the habitual pattern developed in the past that trigger this kind of response, which you don't understand, but still it's happening. So the doubt may be something that you may not accept instead of accepting it. And in samadhi state, all going back to that, the no self, no mind, samadhi. But using the words would point this long discussion. But I thought, at least for me, it was interesting that I can see the whole picture also relating to some of the writings in this book, which maybe nobody will recognize or understand what I'm trying to say, but it's possible, but some people may understand. So let me just end this discussion with one more thought, or one more reference point, which is Shin BUddhism. And I was also listening yesterday about the Myokonin's talk, which is on the YouTube in Japanese, unfortunately, and not many people watch. But that was also to check, not from the angle of Zen, if the Bodhidharma is representing more of the Zen. This Shin BUddhism is less of, let's say, intellectual, as the Zen may trigger more interest. The Shin BUddhism is more of an emotion, and the Myokonin is the group of people who are very devoted in Shin BUddhism, Namu, which is basically you let go of yourself, no self, and let the Amida to take over. Therefore, the Amida's compassion would prevail, and therefore you are saved. Very simple. And the Shinran is the one who talks about, and Myokonin, those Japanese who have, there are many of them, present that the idea. Interestingly, they tend to be more of a basic, common people instead of Zen tend to be more intellectual people. they like to think. The Shin is more of a compassionate and believing, and maybe because of the nature that they don't put so much emphasis in the writing and the logic and the confusing state that can happen for those basic people, typically farmers and so forth in Japan. They don't rely much intellect, but the sense that Amida Buddha is going to save. If you say Namu Amida Butsu, Namu is I let go myself. Amida Butsu is the Amida Buddha who has a vow to save everyone, even the sinners. So instead of being punished by a sinner, being a sinner, you are to say Namu Amida Butsu. So the point of their teaching is even the sinners can come to nirvana. And they believe it. And their talk is similar. It's almost like a flip side of what I just shared with those 4 or 5 items that was discussed with Bodhidharma. This is very simple, that all the logic and the words are basically empty, although Shin Buddhism doesn't use the word emptiness, but they take it not as to be too serious, but behind it, don't trust the word, but trust the love or the affection of Amida Buddha by calling Amida when you're in trouble. So when you're in a state of saying Namu Amida Butsu, or even without saying and thinking toward that, or thinking in the sense of you're letting go by saying Namu Amida Butsu, which means no self, no mind state. So you get to the same state, as was pointed out by this Bodhidharma's, the document he left, and the practice he left, and the Zen ideas that is the lineage that he brought from India to China and then to Japan. Shin Buddhism had gone through from Buddha and to China and then into Shinran in Japan to flourish. Many of those basic farmers and carpenters and those people, like a Saichi, I mentioned the places, are devoted ones because they have realization that they are not perfect, they are inferior in terms of not knowing the language or the words and the logic and all the intellectual stuff, but because of that they may have the faith that even if I'm not good at all the logic and thinking and the intellect, there's a way. Even if I had the sin and have suffered out of that, Amida Buddha is saying that Amida would take care of it. So they believed, and that Myokonin group of people is just like an enlightened Zen monk, but coming from different end. So I talked about the intellect, emotion, and the willpower in one of the videos. Intellect tend to be more of the Zen, and the emotion tend to be more of the Shin Buddhism, and the willpower is the original energy of why we are here, and the way of the laws of universe manifesting that you can relate to and feel strong about, and energy filling up when you go through that transformation, awakening. Or in Shin Buddhism, they call it the Shinjin Ketsujo. Shinjin is faith mind, determines the fate that you are saved. So that's the story of yesterday afternoon for me to resolve it. So, back to the basic, always back to the basic. And you can have various references like I mentioned, but the certain principle, as may have been understood if you are listening this far, has the principle content that we can relate to with the experience. So it's called the experiential wisdom and the compassion that we can find and benefit, even though they may say not the benefit, it is a benefit to get out of the delusionally and suffering state of our life, and even further to wish may all beings be happy. Thank you.